Okay, so welcome everyone. So this is the RAS Town Hall virtually, first time ever. And we hope to get a lot of feedback from you because this is going to help the society, so the Robotics and Automation Society, to move forward. So as Kathy mentioned, I'm going to be moderating this panel discussion. I think there's going to be a lot of interesting topics that we already got from the chat, from the smart sheet. And we have very important guests, as Kathy mentioned. So we have Wolfram. He was the previous president. He works in the Toyota Research Institute. He's a professor at the University of Freiburg. We have Seth. He is the current RAS president from 2020-21. He's a professor at Georgia Institute of Technology in the US. And we have Frank. He is the president-elect. He is going to be the RAS president in 2022 and 2023. He's a professor at Seoul National University from Seoul, South Korea. Okay, so the way we're establishing this is each panelist will have between 5 to 7 minutes to introduce themselves and especially the roles in the RAS society. And afterwards, we will start a small discussion, and everybody, participants are welcome to send questions via the chat. Kathy and Amy and Alexis are going to be monitoring this, and they are going to send us some of your requests. Okay. Okay, maybe first we can start with Wolfram. Wolfram, please, can you tell us a little bit about the history of RAS and where did RAS came from?
Great pleasure to be here and speak a little bit about the past, although history for me is relatively short, being only past president for a couple of months now, but I can talk a little bit about where RAS actually comes from. And so the very first steps towards the Robotics and Automation Society were taken in 1983, which is more than 37 years ago, or almost 37 years ago. It was in December. It was the foundation of the Robotics and Automation Council, which is basically the very first step towards a society. The interesting aspect of these councils is that the members of the councils are societies and not the individuals. So they are basically created by different other societies. And the reason for that was that robotics at that point in time already was a growing field. People started working more and more in robotics, and they came from different societies and backgrounds. For example, aerospace and electric systems or electronic systems, circuits and systems, computers, control systems, industrial electronics, industry applications, systems, man, and Kubernetics. These were all societies from which members actually contributed to the area of robotics. And so there was a step towards setting up a council that was actually the very, very first formal step within IEEE towards a society. And the original council members, right, were like the founding member was George Saridis, and we all know that we have the famous George Saridis Award, which is in honor of one of our founding members, and actually someone who set up that society that we still fill with life these days. He did this more than 37 years ago, which is quite impressive. And then a couple of years later, actually it was in, let me check exactly, in 1989, it was a year my son was born. The council was turned into a society. And so we became actually a full-fledged piece of IEEE, in that we also had our own presentation, our own administration committee, and so on and so forth. And from that point on, our society exists and has continuously grown. And the very first steps towards the real society was the creation of the IEEE Journal on Robotics and Automation, edited by George Becky, a famous roboticist. Then the Robotics and Automation newsletter, which later turned into the Robotics and Automation magazine, and we had a beautiful town hall at last year's ICRA about the history of the magazine. We showed a couple of editions of the past Robotics and Automation magazine. And we also started the International Conference on Robotics and Automation, the first one in 1984 in Atlanta. I was not working in robotics at that time. I was actually studying computer science at that time. And so I actually joined the Robotics and Automation Society in 1998. So it took me a couple of years to realize where my home is. And this is kind of like the past history, and just a few numbers about the size of the society and the conferences. So right now, I think we do have, like in 1986, we had 8,000 subscribers to the society. The first ICRAS had, the 1986 had over 800 attendees, twice as many as in 1985. And there were also a substantial number of people from outside the US. So it was big from the very beginning, but it has continuously grown. There were, always depends also a little bit on where it takes place. Interestingly, and that brings us to the now, when it's everywhere on Earth, it's even bigger. And with this, I turn over to Seth.
Thank you, Wolfram. Yes, Seth, please.
Cool. Kathy, can you let me share my screen? So what I would do is tell you a little bit about what we do these days. And to do that, I'm going to show you some PowerPoint slides. And the PowerPoint slides have way too much stuff on them. So it's not meant to be absorbed in real time. But I know this is a video, and you can go back and pause it for the part that you find interesting and fast forward over the part where you're tired of hearing me. So let me tell you some things that we do. The first thing I'll do is show you these 7 people. These are the vice presidents. So I'm the president, and my main job is to invite these 7 people to do a lot of work. And they do a lot of work. The red words tell you what they do. And what they do also sort of tells you what we do as a society. We do conferences. We have a lot of activities for members. We do technical activities, publications, industrial activities, and electronic things. And then there's Yasushi, the financial guy. I'm not going to talk about finances today because it's not that interesting, and we have enough money, so it's not worth going into much time. Let's see if I can advance. First, for publications, we publish 4 things that are important in the robotics and automation world, and that we own as a society. And here's what those things are. Probably you all know about at least 2 of these, but which 2 you know about might depend on what area you're in. So the Robotics and Automation Letters is the newest thing. It publishes short papers. It's tightly coupled to conferences. If you have things that are well suited for just a few pages as opposed to 15 pages, and you want those results to be out really, really quickly, the Letters promises you a review time that's super fast, just I think 60 days or something guaranteed. I don't want to say the wrong number, but I think it's in the ballpark of 60 days. And that publication, it's now publishing hundreds of papers per year. It's only been in existence about 3 years now, so it's really doing well. I encourage you to have a look at what's published there and to think about publishing there. We also have a bunch of publications that overlap what we do and that we are involved in. And this is that list. And the basic message is, if you write it, we can publish it. We have publications that cover every aspect of robotics that you might find interesting, I think. In the technical side, we have things that are called technical committees. We have more than 40 of them. Here's a list of the current ones that I grabbed from our webpage last night. The technical committees play an important role. And if you're a young person looking for a way to get involved, technical committees are often a good way to get involved. It lets you do things like meet other people that are in the same research area as you, organize workshops at conferences. A lot of the workshops that are happening at ICRA this year began their lives as ideas of people in technical committees. When editor-in-chief or editors-in-chief look for editorial board members, they often look to the technical committees for suggestions. Technical committees often put together special issues of journals. There are a lot of advantages to joining up with these smaller kinds of communities that are specialized in what you're interested in. We have more member activities than I can tell you about. Here are some highlights. I'll talk about just a few. First of all, we are now starting to take very seriously our responsibility as educators. And so we've had a lot of ad hoc educational activities in the past. We're trying to put those together into some sort of coherent activity now. That started just a few months ago, so expect interesting things there. We've started more interaction with developing countries to try and invite people to our conferences from those companies and support what happens in those countries. We've started to look seriously at diversity issues, whether that's geographical diversity or gender diversity. And we've started to look at ourselves in the context of a social organization and how should we behave ourselves so that we don't fall into some of the traps that other scientific societies have fallen into, where you have senior members behaving badly and taking advantage of junior members, for example. We want to make sure that's not happening here. And we want to be aggressive and proactive about that rather than clean up the mess after the fact. So here are just some slides to give you highlights. The Developing Countries Faculty Outreach, we started that in 2017. We just approved a motion a few days ago to put another pile of money into that program to invite scholars from developing countries who might not be able to attend ICRA otherwise to attend. And the nice thing about this, well, one of the nice things about this program is that we pair up the scholars from developing countries with senior people from the society in a mentorship relationship that hopefully will be ongoing over time, so that it's not just a parachute in, give you a week at the conference and send you home and you're alone again. And so we want to find ways to nurture and support our colleagues in countries that might not have the same opportunities. This is a draft of the Code of Conduct. In fact, this is now official. We approved it a few days ago. And if you are interested in all the things that we think are bad behavior, they are enumerated here. Do not do any of these things. We have a committee that stands behind that Code of Conduct. And this is the committee of people that will make sure that we live by the values that we say that we have. And there will be more information coming out about that soon. This is just to say that it's not idle chit chat on our part. We really do take this stuff seriously. In terms of electronic products and services, we have a resource center filled with electronic materials on the website for the Society. This is just a snapshot on the left of some of the educational content. We have an official YouTube channel where we have been collecting videos for a long time. A lot of these are conference videos, plenaries, keynotes, that sort of thing. If you have enjoyed watching videos this week, there are 168 more waiting for you on our YouTube channel. And then for conference activities, we have a lot of conferences that many of you may not know about. This is the list of conferences that we really are behind, that our members are fully responsible for. So if you're specialized in one of these areas, think about participating. And then there's a bunch more that we're involved with, slightly less in the sense that we're financially co-sponsoring, but not necessarily taking complete ownership of and completely driving the car on these. And last, our industrial activities. This is something that's really starting to happen now because industry is really starting to happen in robotics in a way that it did not happen 10 years ago. And so it's no longer just the big iron companies that make robots for large-scale automation. And now you have hundreds of companies ranging from small-scale consumer electronics to companies that normally you think of as information processing companies that are applying those kinds of things to robotics. And we need to really involve those people much more than we have been in our society. And we've been very active in standards. And so at some point in the future, you'll buy robots. There will be standards that you can look up to see how those robots do what they do. They will have been written by people in our society. And I will stop there. Over back to Karinne, who can hand things off to Frank.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Seth. So now we know what the RAS is doing currently. And it will be great, Frank, that you can tell us your vision as the next president-elect. And what do you see RAS going? In which direction?
Oh, okay. You've heard about a lot of the things that are going on right now. And so I'm guessing that because you're watching us, it's not a stretch to assume that you have at least a passing interest in what's happening in our society and what our society can do for you. But I should also tell you a little bit about what I think the role of the president is. And Wolfram and Seth, I think, embody this very well. I think, The RAS president is really not like a dean or a chair or a CEO, but we like to think of ourselves as community organizers. So, we're cheerleaders, we're enablers. We want to connect with our members at the grassroots level and spread, positive energy and, great risky ideas. And so this is the kind of environment that we're trying to foster. I think I can speak for Seth and Wolfram in saying that, we don't want to be remembered for what we did, but probably what took place in society, while during our terms. So anyways, getting back to Karinne's question. So I have roughly 2 years to figure out sort of how to maintain continuity of all the things that have been initiated by Seth and Wolfram. So continuity is obviously very important. But let me tell you a little bit about some of the longer term challenges and what we're going to do to address them. So I think the biggest challenge, and Seth mentioned this, is growth. And at the same time, it's an opportunity, especially of our younger members. We are the 5th largest society in IEEE, and I think we will soon be the 4th largest society. And I think a lot of our younger members are probably asking, what can RAS do for me? So we're big. And I think one way to address this growth is to make our technical committees. You've Seth mentioned that the one of the activities of the Technical Activities Board is to monitor and encourage technical committees. So we're going to we're thinking about really enhancing the role of technical committees and maybe even implementing a 2-tier system. So we have some technical committees that are very visible, very active. 2 that come to mind immediately are close to my area are the humanoids and the soft robotics community. They have very successful, sort of high quality, mid-sized conferences that they run. They're a very close-knit community, and if you go to their workshops, you can just feel the vibe and energy. It's really exciting. Not all of our TCs are there yet. So what we want to do is we want to reward these TCs that are active and doing well, and perhaps give them a budget of their own and really encourage them, give them seats on ICRA and IRAS, maybe seats on our editorial boards for journals, and give them more autonomy, more flexibility, but also hold them to higher standards and higher accountability. And another thing that I think our members are very interested in are obviously conferences. So, we had a little bit of a hiccup this year, but, trust me, 2 years from now, I think we'll be back to business, more or less. And, ICRA organizers are being asked to plan for up to 7,000 participants. So, we'll get back there to 7,000. So we need help. And so we're going to try to get IEEE to help us organize these conferences in a more effective way. Publications, obviously, you're also very interested in. Seth mentioned the letters. This is one of the really great success stories of our communities, and we're going to continue to expand this option where you can publish a paper in journals, and then after it's published, you can actually take that to your conference and to your favorite conference and present the work. The view of a paper, I think, has changed a little bit now. Before a paper had to be 20 pages long, complete, had to contain all the details. But now in this age of the internet and archive and GitHub and all these repositories, perhaps a paper doesn't have to be 20 pages long. It can just be 6 or 8 pages, and it's actually sort of a promotional placeholder for the paper where people can actually look at the paper and then find all the links to get all the details. So in that regard, I think the letters is a tremendous success, and we want to continue expanding these different options of the journal to conference presentation mode. Seth also talked about some of the new initiatives being undertaken by the Industrial Activities Board. I think this has been an area where we've needed some fresh thinking, and I'm glad to see that our current IAB is doing that. one of the things that we're thinking of seriously is actually expanding our presence at the Consumer Electronics Show. Now, those of you who've been fortunate enough to attend the Consumer Electronics CES in Las Vegas, you'll probably agree with me in that it's half of it is a robotics show, basically. All of it's robotics. And I think it's very important that our community, especially our younger members, see how close robotics is to being a consumer product and how it's starting to penetrate our lives in so many ways. So we want to try to expand our presence at CES and give our members an opportunity to go to CES and maybe present papers and see exhibits and interact. Seth also mentioned our a lot of new initiatives in education. I want to really dig further and really invest in our educational efforts. You know, we want to be able to offer courses, MOOCs that are at the same quality or even better than some of the professional courses that we see on Coursera and edX. And I think we're on that path. You know, outreach. I think there's a lot of new exciting things going on. We're also going to try to enhance our outreach program, not just by having lecturers, our senior members visit people, our colleagues in maybe from regions that are not so well represented at our conferences, but I want to really encourage mentoring and close interaction. And, you know, there are a lot of members a lot of smart people all over the world, roboticists, and maybe they just need that, you know, a little bit of advice, maybe like a 5%, you know, maybe you want to include this in paper, maybe you want to do that. And that's all they need to really get their work up to a quality where it can be presented at ICRA and IRAS. And I want to try to establish formal mechanisms for doing that. I think the last thing I want to mention is that, you know, I said that, you know, we as leaders, sort of cheerleaders and conference organizers, and, you know, common culture. And you know, the code of conduct is a part of that, but we really want to create sort of a common culture of what does it mean to be a roboticist, and I hope you'll join us in that endeavor. And I hope I've thrown out some ideas for question and discussion later. Okay, stop there. Thanks.
Thank you, Frank. Yes. So okay. So this is now the time for getting the comments from the audience. So for all of you, when did you become an I2Play RAS member? I guess it's like at which stage of your career do you recommend that somebody joins any of the RAS society?
I'll start because I bet I was first. I think it was 1986 that I joined. I was a student at the time, and I think I joined primarily so that I could receive a paper copy of the transactions on robotics, which today is not necessarily a good reason to join. But in those days, we didn't have email tables of contents and archive and so forth. And so the only way to know what was going on was to pick up bound paper things and read them. And I will boast now that I have every issue of the transactions on robotics in my office in a little shrine in the corner to dead trees in South America. But the advantage of being in that society was it was strong for me because as a young person, I was invited to do things that I would not have been invited to do had I not been an active member showing up as a member of the society. And I'm not nearly aggressive enough to push myself to do things. People had not invited me to do things in the early 1990s. None of you would know who I am today. And maybe you should thank, or maybe you would be better off or happier if that were the case. But I encourage you to get involved because people will invite you and you don't have to push yourself, and it's more pleasant to get involved that way, I think.
Thank you, Seth. Wolfram, Frank, do you have anything to say?
Yeah, so I can, the next, so I started in 1998. I actually was postdoc already at that time. It is actually the case that I moved from a different field into robotics, and I was a little bit a late starter with robotics. But I used to stay in these societies always in fields that interest me. So like put your money where your heart is. It is one of my philosophies. And you know, we are doing very, very cool stuff in robotics as a field, but also in the society. We are organizing these conferences. We're organizing journals, and you know, and then membership comes with so many benefits, particularly for young people, that it actually makes sense to stay involved and stay connected with the society. And I always love to get the transactions submitted, like in and glimpse through it in the very beginning and look to look at the papers that interest me, distribute them to my students. So it's a great source of information as well. And I never regretted to be part of that society. It's great fun, and I can only encourage all people to actually get involved and work together with us.
Thank you, Wolfram. Frank, anything else you want to add? Maybe why do you still a member?
Yeah, just a quick, I guess, question. For those who are wondering, when should I join? Soon as possible. It's very affordable. And in fact, I think we just passed a motion last week where we're going to be giving away free student memberships to volunteers in various competitions. So I encourage everyone to take advantage of that.
That's great. That's great news. Okay, I'm looking forward to the official announcement, hopefully soon. Yeah, Seth?
I'll add one thing. You should join while you're young, because when you're young, the society does things for you. But when you get old, the society starts asking you to do things for it. So you should join while you can benefit before you're old, and then you're asked to do things all the time. This is the right time.
Thank you. Yes. So I think this leads me to the next question, because I missed the part when I think nobody talked about the RAS chapters. And I think this is a very important role, especially for the developing countries. I think, Seth, you mentioned a little bit about the new initiatives that are happening, but I think people are still wondering what is RAS doing for the developing countries. And they see that the RAS chapter is one important way to help them. What do you think?
So there are 2 or 3 things that are beneficial to the chapters, especially in developing nations, I think. We have initiation grants. They're not large. They're like $500 that you can use to start a chapter. And then we have initiatives that we will fund. I think those are like $2,000 US. So we have a budget to fund initiatives that are started at the chapter level. And so as a chapter in a developing nation, or in fact, in any nation for this program, if you have an initiative that you believe in, that you think brings some value, you can propose that. And there's a reasonable chance that you'll get funded for that. We have also a distinguished lecturer program where the society pays travel expenses for a set of lecturers to visit other universities than their own and give lectures. Not nearly as many people in developing countries take advantage of this program as I wish they would. It's an opportunity to get people who are very established and have a lot of wisdom to show up at your institution, give a lecture, and also hang out for a day or two and talk to your faculty and your students and do some mentoring kinds of activities.
Thank you. Yes. And what kind of support is RAS providing for these developing countries in these different regions, especially to bring robotics to these more popular areas or developing areas?
I'll answer this unless Wolfram or Frank wants to. There is the program to provide travel funding both to faculty and to students I think it's primarily for ICRA. I don't remember if we do this also for IROS and for CASE. I think we do it for CASE. And the other thing that we're doing is we're really trying now, and it's not ready and in a great functional form yet, but we're trying now to put a lot of educational materials on the web, which is not useful if you just have a flood of information that people have to search through. It needs to be curated in the right way. It needs to be organized in a helpful way so that people can access it on their own, independently, without needing a personalized guide to lead them through. And I think you'll see us doing a much better job of that. A lot of our colleagues are doing this already independently, either through YouTube channels or channels at their own universities. So there's a lot of stuff that isn't necessarily stamped with our logo, but that's being done by our members that I think is useful in developing nations. And of course, a number of universities are now providing very low-cost educational programs. And if those are doing robotics, it's almost certain that the people driving it would be at a normal ICRA as our members.
Yeah, but I also think one of your slides, you mentioned that the conferences and speeches are being recorded. So this also helps the community to,
yes,
to broadcast, right?
In anticipation of one of the questions that I think I saw in the chat, I do believe that in the future, the big conferences, maybe all the conferences, but certainly the bigger conferences like ICRA, my expectation is that there will be a hybrid format for these conferences so that you aren't required to attend the conference physically to benefit from what's presented at the conference. And the exact format of that, I don't think we know yet. We're all watching ICRA 2020. You will, if you're attending ICRA 2020, you'll get a survey. I hope you fill it out with a lot of comments and tell us what worked and what did not work. And you should expect that you will see a big change in how we did things this time from how we do things next time based on our experience, because a lot of us are control theorists and we know about feedback. And so we'll use it the right way to converge to the optimum, hopefully really quickly.
Right, find the optimal. Okay. So Frank, I think you can take this.
That's also, I mean, like when you look at this week's ICRA, or the last 1.5 weeks that we observed at ICRA, we have plenty of participants from countries that we typically do not see. So, for example, during the plenaries, we had a question from Bangladesh, and I actually cannot remember having run into someone with a name tag where it said Bangladesh. And I think this is a great chance for the Robotics and Automation Society, for science, and for all of us to get more easily connected with people from poorer countries. And I think particularly also now the registration fees, which are really affordable for with 25 dollars, right? It's super euro. It's actually very, very cheap. And I think that's a great chance also for the future for us. And the same actually also is the case with the chapters. You know, the hurdles for getting like a grant are relatively low. It is up to $2,000 for initiatives that are local, where people want to get involved into robotics and do something for the local community, explain what robots are, do student projects with robots, and so on and so forth. And it is taken up very, very actively. Unfortunately, not that much in Africa. So I would love to see more there. When you look at the map, then yeah, the Africa map is relatively empty. So there is more we can do, and there's more we maybe should also do. But we are at least like formally having like relatively low hurdles, and we may need to do more, but there is opportunities.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do agree. I think now this ICRA is showing us a new perspective. And now that we're talking about ICRA, there was a question about, so there are these two top conferences in robotics, ICRA and IRAS. And the person is asking, okay, which one of these conferences should I target when I submit my work? Because there seems to be top ones on robotics, and he feels conflicted, I think.
Oh, I would say there's no difference. Whatever conference is easier for you to attend. Absolutely no difference. So it's the timing and the location. They both have letters options. They're both are two flagship conferences. That's an easy one to answer.
I agree, and I must add something to this. I think we are in a wonderful situation in robotics that we have 2 flagship conferences per year, and they are located in like half a year distance, so that I mean, the best that can happen to you is you get, like in the worst case, that you get your paper accepted. You have enough time to revise it and improve on it and make it better and submit it to the next one. So that is, I think, you do not have to wait for a couple of months until you can submit to that conference again. And I think that makes it enormously attractive. I'm also thinking that we should harmonize them a little bit more, even maybe even also technically, keyword wise, because of that constellation. I think it is very, very good. And my suggestion would be submit to the next one where you think your paper is ready.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. And this leads me to the next question, actually, because this is a very controversial one. It's about the reviewing process. So it says, when will IEEE robotics move to a more progressive review, such as open review? And if it's not possible, the person say, why? What are the disadvantages of not doing so? Or what are the advantages that overweight the disadvantages?
My guess is that the opinions will be very different, even among the 3 of us. I think the opinions would be even more different if you had a wider age group of people that present in the conversation. So I will tell you only mine, not speaking as an authority figure, but just speaking as Seth. I think there are a lot of disadvantages to publishing the reviews publicly. I'm a big fan of peer review and publishing things after they have been through a peer review process. The reviews themselves don't go through a peer review process. I can say any angry or destructive thing that I please in a review. And if that review is published, I have a voice that maybe I should not have. I like having anonymous and private peer review comments to the authors. Because the authors, I will tell you this, if I'm reviewing a paper from Wolfram and it's badly written and not well thought out, I will write very candidly, Wolfram, as a reviewer, I am so disappointed that you sent this piece of garbage to this journal. If I'm reviewing a paper that's exactly the same, but comes from a young student in a 3rd world country or a developing nation, I won't say that. I will offer encouragement and try to be helpful in a very different way. So I think it's important that I, as a reviewer, know who I'm writing to. And I also think it's important that I, as a reviewer, can give candid advice or candid remarks to the author without exposing those to the world, right? I don't want to humiliate authors in front of the whole world if I write negative comments. But I do want to be able to write those negative comments in a constructive way. So I like the way we have the review process structured now, so that I know who is the author if I'm a reviewer, and I know that my comments are intended only for the editorial folks and the authors involved. But that is just my opinion, and the world is changing, and that may be out of date, may already be out of date.
Thank you, Seth. Wolfram, Frank?
Yeah, so I mean, I completely agree with Seth in the fact that it is only, everyone has a different opinion on that. I think the first important thing that we should do is to figure out what a good review is. And there's very, very little. I know that Seth once wrote an article or a short note about this, but I am still searching for that, or for the outcome of a debate. Like, how should a proper review? What should a proper review be? And I think, first of all, we should clarify this before we go public and put all this onto the net and make it all available for everyone. We all know that not all reviews are well done, and I mean, even good reviews can be bad. Yeah, but I think that we should be a little bit more conservative there before we can be aggressive and publish all that. But this is also my personal opinion.
Yeah, Frank, do you have anything else?
So strange quirk. The three of us all have very extensive experience. Seth was a former editor-in-chief of the Transactions. I succeeded Seth, and Wolfram has been editor-in-chief of the RAS Conference editorial board for several years. So I think we're pretty much on the same page. You know, I remember I emphasized continuity, so we feel the same way. But at the same time, our society is very large, and it's almost like living organisms. We have a lot of different conferences, several journals, and there's a lot of experimentation going on. So I know that some of the more progressive conferences are trying some of these new ideas, open reviews, and maybe giving authors an opportunity to rebut reviewers online. So we'll see. I think our society is flexible and progressive enough that we can easily adopt new ideas across different journals, different conferences. So I think yeah, we'll have to see.
Thank you, Frank. Yeah, I think this sparkled now the discussion on chat because there is someone that mentioned, okay, why not having a rebuttal process? I think main AI conferences, they do have this rebuttal. So why not in the RAS conferences?
So yeah, I think we can't really issue an edict saying all reviews in all of our RAS sponsored conferences and journals will be held this way. We don't operate like that. We're very decentralized in that respect. But as you say, we see some of that happening in some of our smaller conferences, and maybe it'll expand.
Yeah, and then there's also this question like as to whether rebuttals actually help. You never know. There's also little evidence, and there's different forms of rebuttals. So that even at these more modern conferences where things were tried out, it wasn't entirely clear that the reviewers actually also changed their opinions or reviews after the rebuttals came in. That also rarely happens, and I mean, it might make the authors more happy to have to say something, the opportunity to say something against the reviews, and maybe also helps to forecast, to live with the decision, to the final decision of the paper, because you can see what's coming. Yeah, but in general, I think it is important to think about how to change the reviewing process, and also listen to the young people. I know that young people are completely into double-blind reviews, although it is difficult to actually hide your identity when it comes to writing your paper. And we all know this, and I know RSS, and IEEE, or the Robotics and Automation Society has even been involved in the most recent RSS, right? It is now in Paper Plaza or PaperSept. So we do have like adopted to these kind of things, and we are experimenting also. We're doing this with our conferences as well, the way we present. And I think it is important to explore things. We shouldn't always be too agile with our flagships, I think. And maybe we are doing the right thing right now, exploring with these like smaller sized events where we can actually see how things go and then adopt the best opportunities for our flagship conferences.
I'll just add the word pragmatism to this discussion. When you have thousands of papers being submitted to ICRA, it requires multiple thousands of reviewers. And if you invite all of those authors into a rebuttal process, you are tying up the whole community for days in rebutting and evaluating rebuttals and considering revising decisions. And it's an enormous amount of work. If I were convinced that it really would make a big difference, that things would be much better, I would support doing the work. But all the experiences that I have had with the rebuttal process, on the reviewer side, on the author side, and on the editor side, tells me that not many decisions change. And it also tells me that everybody whose paper is rejected writes a rebuttal that's way too long. Own students did that this year for RSS. I tried to stop them, and there's just no way to stop authors of rejected papers from writing long rebuttals. And it consumes a lot of time. So I don't see the advantage, especially when we have the letters available. So if you want to send an ICRA paper and be sure that you have your shot at rebuttal, send it to the letters. It's a review process that offers you a chance to rebut and revise and resubmit.
Yeah, thank you, Seth. So now that we are still talking about the review process, I think that the ICRA format this year was very well accepted, and people is wondering if you can also transfer this to IROS or RAL about having the references on extra page and do not count as the page limit.
I mean, just we did some statistics about page length, and the outcome was that longer papers have a higher chance of acceptance. That might, I mean, one also needs to be careful about causality and correlation. I mean, what we observed there was just a correlation, and the reasons for that were unclear. You might now argue that if you invest 2 times $175 into your paper, you have a higher chance of getting it accepted. That could be like maybe one conclusion to draw. The alternative could be that richer countries, which like maybe richer universities and also maybe more qualified personnel can actually pay into that, and so that people who are actually have a higher standard can have automatically a higher chance of getting their papers accepted, and that it is actually related to the people who are behind the papers and not the length of the papers. Still, I think it makes sense because it gives everyone the same limits. My hope is that we are going to continue with that. It has also the opportunity that people can cite more, because you have like 2 pages of opportunities for citing things, so that also our citation indices go up. These factors that journals are compared. That's also one aspect. We didn't go as far as other events like CVPR, I think, where even the figures don't count. So it is just the pure text and then figures plus references, because you also want to encourage authors to have more figures and be like more visual in their papers. And so we took one step. I hope that we will keep it. We will be able to keep it. It doesn't necessarily need to be the final step that we take, but we need to observe again what's going to happen.
So I'll just add one thing that's not very interesting, but that matters a lot. And that is that IROS, we do not own that conference. We share that conference with other organizations. And so even if everybody in the Robotics and Automation Society thinks something is a great idea, we have to also convince other people that it's a great idea. And if you watch the history of ICRA and IROS, you will see that at least 3 or 4 different times, ICRA did something startling, revolutionary, like we started an editorial board for the conference, and it worked. And a few years later, IROS had the same. And so I think, I mean, the same thing with the letters. We did that with ICRA and it worked, and IROS joined immediately. When we do things that don't work, IROS doesn't ever do those things. So they have the luxury to sit back and watch us and see how it goes, but they typically adopt the things that work. And I suspect that they will do the same with this 6+N for the citations, but we'll see.
But I think we can also push for the letters, no, to go in this direction.
For the letters, we can do that. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So we are almost out of time. So we have a couple of minutes. Do you want to say some last words before we close the session? Like, what do you think is important? What do you think is important to become a volunteer as a RAS in one of the RAS teams or the TC? What is it, the added value for you as a young researcher?
If I may take the first part of that, I'll make it short. The first part of it is getting connected. It is super important to establish your network, even as a young scientist. I still have the connection to the people I met at the very first conferences, and these are typically people at your age, and even the more senior people I met and first talked to, I still talk to them. And it is an establishment of a society and your environment, people you can talk to, and that might also help you with your career. And if you get involved and help the society at some point in time, you will also get help from the society. And we are there to support all of us.
I, of course, completely agree with all the things that Wolfram has said. If I list, the 10 people in the world that I think of as my best friends, 6 to 8 of them are roboticists that I met at an ICRA for the first time I met them. A lot of those friendships are much more important to me than the technical content of a robotics conference any given year. On the professional side, I can point to very specific things in my life where somebody said, Seth, why don't you do this? And after I did that, my career was a lot better than before I did that. There are things that people think, oh, Hutchinson, he's like one of the fathers of this kind of area. And I'm not a father at all. I just happened to be invited to collect a bunch of papers into a special issue once. And so sort of quirks of history that you do service, and it can be very beneficial. And that sounds, a bit cynical maybe in some ways, but I think in the end it pays off for you and for the society. Now that I've done all that 20 years later, I'm spending a lot of time working on behalf of the society. So it is a circle that closes in the end. And I think it's good to get into that circle soon.
Thank you, Seth. Frank?
Yeah, I think, well said by Seth and Wolfram. I have to agree with everything that they said. I don't know if there's much more I can add to that, other than the fact that although it may not feel like it now, we don't live in a bubble. We have to interact with each other, and this is going to be your society, your community. So the right thing to do is to get involved and give back. That would be my message.
Yeah, I think this is a very great opportunity to get back to the community. And I think this should be an evolving process. And so any last words? I don't know, Kathy, Amy, Alexis, thank you for organizing this. I think this has been a great opportunity for the members to know what the Robotics and Automation Society is and mean, because there is a lot of question about why should I join this. Anything else do you want to talk about before we say goodbye?
I'd just like to thank you all for joining, and especially to our 3 Ps who gave us so much great advice. This video is being recorded and will be posted on the RAS website. So all of the attendees listening now, please tell your friends to listen in, because you've got some great advice from really smart people. So thanks for attending, and hope to see you sometime in the future.